Racism definitely took a toll on black male-female relationships, especially in the 1960s, because in the 1960s, black men and black women, they were doing what they were supposed to have done for a long time, which was fight together against white supremacy, against racism. And they were doing this with the civil rights movement. So what happened, people had to come in and infiltrate and have a divide and conquer strategy between black men and black women. In 1964, government came in and they pulled black women to the side and they started to classify black women and women in general as minorities. In 1964, that's the first time they classified women as minorities. So they started to give them set-asides and benefits, and then they created the feminist movement, and a lot of sisters branched off into that, and that kind of created a rift because a lot of sisters stopped fighting for civil rights and they started to fight for women's rights, but women's rights weren't being jeopardized in the black community. Our first priority was racism, and we should have dealt with that first.
We wanted to be free. We didn't need any boundaries, need no man to tell us what to do. Well, we hadn't had no man to tell us what to do anyway. You couldn't tell us what to do in slavery, so we didn't really have no fight with you about that. That was the white woman's fight with her man, but we took it on. I want to be free. Ain't nobody gonna tell me what to do. And then women started having babies, what they call out of wedlock, and then that got to be okay too. Oh, it's all right. Once it got accepted by society, all of the rest of the people, then it was okay then to just have a baby. In fact, I don't even want him for nothing but to just have a baby. And then we started saying, oh, I'm gonna be the mother and the father. All kind of nonsense. And so what happened was that movement, and there never was a sisterhood in the women's liberation movement between the black woman and the white woman.
Because you have to understand, in the tactic of the art of war, when you want to destroy a stronger enemy, you have to get rid of the cultural perspective of authority. So what do? You have to destroy the man in the society. And that's exactly what they did. I talk about this in my book. You have to destroy the masculine principle, which is the head of the family. That's part of it. The other part is to get rid of the environment and the ways and means for the head or the authority of that family to become and stay the authority and the head of that family, and that is to be the provider and the protector. Take away his means of providing, take away his means of protecting his family, and he no longer has any rights or any kind of power. So when you have done that, you have now undermined the glue that keeps a family together. Men don't have to be men anymore. So what's the best thing to do? Since you're giving so many favors to women, I might as well be a woman, or at least act like one, and therefore I'm no longer, as Dr. Francis Cress said, I'm no longer a threat.
If whites are involved in their genetic survival and they are threatened by black male masculinity, then it will occur, I have to reduce his masculinity. Yeah, we just recently had the president at Morehouse have to say the male students cannot wear high-heel shoes and dresses and carry purses. So something is happening, again, within the total context of a system of racism, white supremacy. Neely Fuller, who wrote the textbook for victims of racism a number of years ago, in the mid-70s, he used to say in the system, because he was the first person to talk about racism as a system, and he said that as the system of racism, white supremacy moves on, the system is going to have black men wearing dresses. Now, to hear that in the 70s, people said, oh, this is way out. And here we are. Do you see, there's some black pediatricians who are saying we are developing epidemic levels of the effeminization of young black males. Well, I say the pants sagging down is just a subconscious invitation for homosexuality. You see, it's revealing the buttocks. See, so the pants are getting lower and lower and lower. The next step is to step out of the pants altogether. And so you step out of the pants, you're going to put on a dress. The effeminization is an essential ingredient of white genetic survival, and the only thing that can prevent it is black people becoming conscious or becoming determined that this is not going to happen to them, because if the black men are destroyed, then the black people are gone, and we have a state of genocide.
They always have in the media that black children inherently have lower IQs. They always show these studies of black children's IQs being lower, but what they leave out is that African immigrants, they come over to America and they outperform everybody else academically, including Asians and including whites.
Because first of all, IQ is so culture-based. I mean, IQ doesn't exist. And the evidence of that is just look around you. Because if that's the case, Europeans ain't doing that great either. Because compared to the world, out of 166 countries that was tested, the United States of America, European American students, there was only 12 countries did worse than the United States of America. So IQ, it has nothing to do with, that's a lot of game.
First, the concept of IQ, the intelligence quotient, comes out of Germany during the rise of Hitler. It was a German white man by the name of Wilhelm Stern who created the intelligence quotient for population extermination reasons. He was later rejected and put out of Hitler's camp, but the IQ is an invention of Nazi Germany. Now, the first IQ test ever used in the world comes out of France. A European named Alfred Binet, at the request of the French government, was asked to design a test whereby the French government could group or track the students based on how bright they were and identify those who they felt would not be successful in school at all. A white man from New Jersey, Henry H. Goddard, who was a member of the American Eugenics Society, went to France, got a copy of the Binet scales, first white IQ test, brought the Binet scales back to America, made copies of it, and distributed it across the country to white folks everywhere. And Henry H. Goddard himself said that with this tool, we will be able to accomplish our eugenicidal ends. So from the beginning, the IQ test was never meant as an objective standard to see how smart black kids was. It was used to justify access to opportunity and extermination and racial control.
And they're not being taught. I have a boy, Hassan, he's 10, and I took him to school, and he was at the genius level because I had taught him at home. You know, he was like 7 years old, he had an IQ of 153. Well, they made sure they dumbed him down, and 2 years later, he was barely passing. I had to take him, I said, and I fought with him every day.
They snatched it. It's like when our children in school are saying that, you know, when somebody's real smart, they say, oh, you acting white. They don't understand that people that look like them invented thinking. In fact, we were thinking before Europeans were even on the planet. Yet we don't know this about ourselves. And because our children are not familiar with this history of themselves, they can't see themselves because they're taught that slaves came from Africa. And so therefore, I'm going to act like a slave because that's who I am. But they don't see themselves as Imhotep, or they don't see themselves as Queen Nzinga, or Preshet, a second dynasty female doctor, or they don't see themselves as Hypatia, a great mathematician and medical doctor that was skinned alive by the Romans because they did not want to show an African woman being so intelligent, and dragged her through the community to show people what they were going to do to this African woman.
The African man and the African woman's mind does not operate along European paradigm of structure. So if you're teaching him one way, he's going to automatically fail. If the system is structured for him to fail, of course he's going to fail. He's going to say, see, I told you. That's ridiculous. We know that genius is definitely and always has been in the African mind, because everywhere you go on the planet, you see African genius once left to its own accord. But when manipulated, you could turn him or that genius in her into something that is demonic. Back in 1964, they created a whole other way of teaching your son. It was called outcome-based education. It wasn't about you learning math and knowing what math was. 1 and 1 equals 2. 2 was the answer. If you got 3, you were wrong. But today, if 1 and 1 and you say 3, you say, oh, you tried. It's all right. we'll pass you on. That's all right. You did your best. See, so what they did was, in outcome-based education, it became more feminized. It became more of a communal participation in the act or idea of learning, not learning. If you could come together and participate in group things, that showed that you had the ability to be passed on into the new society. If you were a rogue and you jumped out and said, no, I ain't going for this, which is where all the gangs started coming from, because most of the males could not deal in an education system that was like this. And this is why you see most of the females getting the PhDs today, because the system was structured in such a way that took away the challenge that men needed.
And it was through the IQ test, which is the #1 weapon of special education, which is the #1 weapon of special education. They continue to overdiagnose and misdiagnose black children as being mentally retarded who are not. I had a case in Philadelphia this past summer right here. Some white lawyers asked me to come in and participate in the case. Black boy, 8th grade, diagnosed as mentally retarded. I evaluated the brother, found out he was never mentally retarded. But when I looked into the previous IQ tests that were given, they misinterpreted the data. So this young man been walking around with a diagnosis of mental retardation since he was in 8th grade. He's now a young adult, and although he's been told by me and his parents that you are not retarded and you were never retarded, the self-esteem, the self-concept, the self-image is so crushed, this brother probably gonna need therapy for the next 20 years because he bought into what? A superficial label that white society has given.